from Genesis chapter 45, 1 through 8.
Then Joseph could no longer control himself before all of his attendants, and cried out, "Have everyone leave my presence." So there was no one with Joseph when he made himself known to his brothers. And he wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard him, and Pharaoh's household heard about it. Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Is my father still living?" But his brothers were not able to answer him, because they were terrified at his presence. Then Joseph said to his brothers, "Come close to me." When they had done so, he said, "I am your brother Joseph, the one you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed, and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. For 2 years now there has been famine in the land, and for the next 5 years there will be no plowing and reaping. But God sent me ahead of you to preserve for you a remnant on earth, and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So then it was not you who sent me here, but God. He made me father to Pharaoh, lord of his entire household, and ruler of all Egypt." The word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God. Please be seated. I don't know if I told you the story that a bus driver of a church and the pastor went to heaven after that. And they were standing in line to get into heaven. And the angel who was getting them, doing the check-ins, said, "Welcome, I understand you are the bus driver." The driver went in while the pastor was waiting in line. "And I understand that you are a driver. Since I am in charge of the housing, I'm going to give you that big mansion on the hilltop, beautiful one." So he got that mansion, and the preacher was still waiting in line and saw what the driver got, the church bus driver got, and the pastor thought he was going to be a good deal for him, because if the driver got that kind of a big mansion, it is going to be a great, great mansion waiting for him. So he said, "I must be in line for a great castle." Anyway, when the pastor's turn came, and he said, "Welcome, I understand you were a preacher, and that's your cabin over there in the basement of that mansion." The pastor was really upset. It's nothing against pastors. In protest, the preacher said, "Hey, I work for God. I was a preacher, and I sacrificed my time and my family, and I toiled and helped people to know God. And why does my bus driver get a mansion, and I'm getting his basement?" And the angel said, "Well, it seems that when you preached, the people slept, and when the bus driver drove, people prayed." So we get surprises in our lives, one way or other. Sometimes they are good, sometimes they are bad, and we don't like them. And these are like puzzles that I called today's message work of art or puzzle pieces. Our lives are made of puzzle pieces, many pieces that put together to make a beautiful picture at the end. Some pieces may be hard, and some pieces may be easy to find and put in place. I know when my boys were growing up, we have 2 boys, they're all grown up now, but they loved these jigsaw puzzles. We have boxes and boxes of them at home. For some reason, they were into that during a stage in their life. I believe that is what they are into. So we have boxes and boxes of them at home. And the older one of them makes his choice based on the picture on the outside box, how it looks and the beauty of it, and he looks at and makes his decisions based on the picture. And the other one, on the other hand, he looks at the complexity of the puzzle. There's there's the complexity is listed, the difficulty is listed 1, 2, 3, the stage levels, and he looks at those stage levels and picks on based on that. So each one of us get to pick. If you go to a game store and pick one of these games, you can pick up whatever you want. That is the beauty of the puzzle games. But life is a puzzle game that you cannot pick what you want. You get the pieces as they come, and then you fit them together. And like it or not, some puzzle pieces are very hard, and some puzzle pieces may be easy. And some of them are fun and some of them are not fun. Some get to solve the easy puzzles and others seem to get the challenging ones all the time. Don't we feel like that? We get always the challenging ones. But in either case, the potential beauty that it can become is rewarding. But when you first open the box, the puzzle looks nothing like the picture on the outside. It is simply a jumbled pieces in a bag. That's what you get. So if life is compared to a puzzle, it may be a simple puzzle with 100 different pieces, or it may be a complicated puzzle with 1,000 pieces. And there may be unpleasant or uncomfortable ones that you may like or not. In Genesis, as we continue with the study in the book of Genesis, we started from the beginning. It's the journey through Genesis that we are doing. We have talked about various things about the lives of Jacob, who was called and named as Israel, who became the father of the nation of Israel. He went to get, we all talked about a story in the past few Sundays where he was a cheater, a trickster, and a schemer. He cheated his father, his brother, and went on and ran away for his life to his mother's home, to live with his uncle looking for a wife. And there also he was faced with his father-in-law Laban, who was more tricky and scheming than Jacob himself. So you cheated your father, going to a schemer and a bigger trickster who is your father-in-law. Instead of getting one wife, he ended up with two. The one wife he did not like, Leah, but she was the one who gave birth first with 6 children. The one he loved, Rachel, did not have children for a long time. And finally, you all know the story that he had to pack up and leave because of Laban's hard labor that he put on him. He packed up and left so he can come back to his homeland. Well, it's not easy to go back there because his brother, who was angry, who was waiting to kill him, was still there. He knows that. But he had no place to go. Either live with his father-in-law who is treating him so badly, or go back and apologize and get settled with his brother. So he decided to go back home. Probably that is a good way to do it, right? To go back home and apologize and get settled. So he decided to do that. But on his way, we saw that he has a wrestle with God. And he wrestled and boxed with God at night. And he got the blessing that he will become the father of nations. And then finally, as promised, Rachel, his beloved wife, had one son. And then she also had another son later on, but she died at that second son's birth time. But the first son was Joseph. The loved wife, Rachel, first son was Joseph. And then several years have passed, and Rachel was very happy. Jacob was very happy because they have a son together in their wedding, in their marriage. And Joseph was about 17 years old when this incident happened, where he was loved by Jacob so much because, first of all, he was born when Jacob was very old, and also he was the son of his beloved wife Rachel. So he loved him so much, and he gave him some preferential treatment, which is a lesson for us parents. We don't want to do preferential treatments to our children. It can end up in trouble. So the other children, particularly his half-brothers, Joseph's half-brothers, did not like him because his father gave him a lot of gifts. One of the greatest gifts he gave him was a great coat, a multicolored coat. Looked probably like a puzzle. Eventually it turned out Joseph's life became a puzzle. That's why I called this message and titled it Puzzle. But Joseph's life was full of strange events, unexpected things happening. And he used to dream dreams. And the dreams were not pleasant to the brothers because many of the dreams that he dreamed was pointing to that he become greater than the rest of the brothers. And the brothers started hating him more. Not only that he dreamed, he had the guts to share it with their brothers. And they hated him more. So they were planning to do something and hurt him or kill him. So one day, his brothers were tending sheep in the desert. Joseph joined them. And then they used that opportunity to destroy him or kill him. But fortunately, one of the brothers, Reuben, interfered, and instead of killing him, they decided to put him in a big well, a well with no water in there, so they can spare his life. But during that time, some Midian traders, merchants were traveling through that area. So instead of putting him there and kill him in the well, they decided to trade him or sell him to these travel merchants. So they sold him to that merchants, and they took Joseph, a 17-year-old beautiful Hebrew boy, to Egypt. And he became, then he was again sold to somebody called by name Potiphar. You can read all of that in the chapters before that. And he was the captain of the pharaohs at that time. And Joseph became a helper in the family of this Potiphar, who was the captain of the pharaoh. Joseph lived there and helped out as responsibilities came to him, and he was very faithful in everything he did. He was not bitter because of what happened to him. And the brothers who went back home to tell Jacob that they lost their brother, actually made up a story that a wild animal killed him. And they saw him in Egypt, serving in an Egyptian house, Potiphar's house, where he was blessed by God. And he continued to trust in a God, that God is always good, regardless of what our circumstances turn out to be. And he was faithful in everything that he was given to do. So Potiphar made him the chief of the servants of his palace. And that he did a good job with that. And then Potiphar's wife made a trick on him, and eventually had a problem with his wife, and she tried to trick him into getting her with him, but he refused. So finally he ended up in prison because of that. And you can read all of that story. And he was still not bitter. It was not his fault. In fact, it was his standing for truth that made him go into that prison. Even there, God blessed him. And his fellow prisoners eventually became friends with him, and they were from the palace of the Pharaoh. And along this time, this is a big story, long story, but I'm going to give it to you in a nutshell, because all of these puzzle pieces are so important in Joseph's life when we look at his life. So Joseph, while in this prison, his fellow prisoners who were put in there were from the palace of the Pharaoh. The baker and the cupbearer were caught in some crime, and they were punished and put in prison, and they became the prisoners, co-prisoners with Joseph here. Even in that prison, he was faithful. So the prison guards made him chief of the prisoners there. I mean, look at how things turn out to be. Wherever Joseph goes, he is becoming the chief of whatever he is in, even in prison, or even in a servant role. Because of his integrity and his faithfulness and the commitment to the work that he was doing, he was raised to a level of management wherever he was. So finally, something happened with the Pharaoh. One day he saw a dream, and he was puzzled by the dream. And you know, Joseph is a dreamer, and he can also interpret and say the meanings of the dreams. And the prisoners who were with him knew that, because they had some interactions with him with some dreams. So the Pharaoh heard about Joseph's ability to say the meanings of the dream, and he called Joseph to come and interpret the dream that the Pharaoh had. And Joseph explained the dream and the meaning to the Pharaoh, and the Pharaoh was very pleased. And the dream was that there were like 7 animals who were lean and 7 animals who were healthy, and 7 years of famine, and 7 years of prosperity. That's what the meaning of the dream was. And the Pharaoh was very, very impressed by Joseph's explanation and the meaning, and he made him the prime minister of Egypt. What else can you ask for? A person who was traded or eventually decided to be killed by his brother, eventually by luck or fortune or God's blessing, was delivered and handed to the merchants, taken to a foreign land to be a servant in a captain's house, became chief there and was put into prison because of a trickery of the lady there. And then, by God's grace, here is a Pharaoh who dreamed a dream that only Joseph could interpret. What kind of puzzle pieces are these in one person's life? And throughout all these things, it was none of his faults that he went through all of these things. He was still a man of integrity, a man of faithfulness, a man of commitment to whatever he was given to do faithfully. And God prospered him in all this role, and he became the second in command to the Pharaoh of Egypt. And then the famine came, and as he predicted the meaning of that dream, there was a famine in the whole world at that time. And not only in Egypt, but because of Joseph's genius and his planning, he was able to gather all the grains of the land and have it in their storage, so that they were very well prepared for the coming famine. But Jacob, his brothers, and his father were in Canaan. They were also affected by the famine. And they heard that there is grain in Egypt. And they decided to go, or Jacob decided to send his children to get grain from Egypt. But never did they know that it was their brother who is the prime minister there, who is managing everything as chief of the land. They did not know that. They never expected in the worst dreams of their life. So here they are, the brothers came to collect this grain, and they did not know it was Joseph, but Joseph recognized his brothers. And even at that time, he did not have a pinch of bitterness to his brothers. What a marvelous, marvelous life that is. If I could be like that, or all of us could be like that, even in all these strange puzzle pieces that he got, and the tough times and the hard times and the punishment that he got for nothing, all of that, when he looked back, he did not feel any bitterness towards his brothers or anybody for that matter. He was very, very faithful and a man of integrity in everything that he was given to do. So at this time, that is what we read today, that he finally disclosed himself to his brothers, telling him that this is Joseph, the brother you have sold to the Midian merchants in the desert. This is Joseph. I am in charge of this country here. You can imagine the fear that probably came into the brothers' hearts at that time. And they were trembled. They were shaken. And they thought Joseph was going to kill them. I mean, wouldn't you think? But Joseph said, do not be afraid or alarmed. God sent me here ahead of time to plan for this famine, to keep our family together from perishing. That was his attitude. Every event in our life, like it or not, God has a plan behind it. We don't like the pandemic. We don't like the things, the fire and the hurricanes and all those things. There are bad things. There is nothing really good to see in it. But at the end of all, there is a big picture that we can see through all these puzzles that are being put together. If you look at the outside of the box, there is a bigger picture on that box that we are shooting for. Some pieces may be hard, some pieces may be easy. Some of them are uncomfortable, some of them are very pleasant. But if you put all of these together and be faithful and be honest in what we are doing, in the places that God has given us to do, there is going to be a beautiful picture that will turn out to be at the end, on the outside of the box. There was a building construction going on, and then a person was watching this, people doing various jobs in that construction site. And this man approached the laborer who was laying bricks and asked him, "What are you doing?" Then the laborer said, Can't you see what I'm doing? I'm laying bricks. That's what I'm doing." Then he walked over to another bricklayer along the same line. He's doing the same work, and asked him, "What are you doing?" And he said with pride, "I am building a palace." Both were physically doing the same work, but the first laborer was occupied with the present task, and the other was concerned with the ultimate goal. Trust in God that our lives were made with a purpose. A life without purpose is like a race without a finish line. Let us run that race with a goal to finish. In the big picture, we all have something meaningful to add, and we all have our rightful place in the grand design. We all face all kinds of struggles and problems that can leave us puzzled by worry, anger, or sickness. We may feel broken, like the puzzle pieces in the bag, but God can always see the bigger picture, the picture on the outside of the box. In Ecclesiastes, Solomon says that God has made everything beautiful in its time. Although burdens of life will arise, God takes the broken pieces of our pain, our sadness, our worry, and our grief, and works in them to create something beautiful and whole. God knows the potential we hold. When our hearts are heavy and our strength is low, we can trust that with God our puzzles will be completed for a beauty piece at last. We build our lives as you would build like a puzzle. Socrates said, "The world is a puzzle. No need to make sense out of it. But we want to make sense of our lives because we live only once." God has a plan for our lives and make beauty out of it. All the saints of faith who have gone before us had to have these puzzle pieces in their lives they put together, like Joseph, David, Abraham, Moses. The finished masterpiece we would not know now, but there is a bigger picture that you and I are shooting for. The one thing I don't like to do once my kids put all of this together is to take them apart. It hurts me. So what I do is to, when they put all this together, I put it on a big cardboard and paste them there. So I can put it on a wall or somewhere I can enjoy it, and so many of them are sitting there. And once in a while I take them out and look at it. The hours of work that they did, the easy pieces and the hard pieces became so beautiful that you can look at it at the end and say, what a marvelous piece of work that is. The Old Testament character Joseph learned through the extreme difficult puzzle pieces in his life that God is good and faithful. The lesson that we learn is from these all life experiences is that always seek the best possible outcome. Concern yourself with what you can control. Look for the lesson to be gleaned, not what you may lose. Remember the wise words that pass down from generation to generation. This too shall pass, and this too will pass. So above all things, be patient and make the most out of our every moment. May God bless you with these words.